They had the combined IQ of a small nation. 50 of the world's brightest minds, MIT graduates, former NSA cryptographers, and lead engineers from Silicon Valley's biggest titans, locked in a room for 48 hours. They had supercomputers, they had AI algorithms, they had desperation, but they didn't have the answer. As the company's stock price plummeted in real time on the screens behind them, the solution didn't come from the billionaire CEO or the lead scientist. It came from the corner of the room, from the person nobody looked at, the person refilling the water pitcher. This is the story of how 50 geniuses failed, and the invisible waitress who saved them all. You might want to sit down for this one. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. That's how Alice Jenkins felt as she pushed her beat-up 2008 Honda Civic into the parking lot of the Avery, an ultra-exclusive private dining club overlooking the Sound. Alice was 26, but her eyes looked 40. She wore her brown hair in a tight, severe bun that pulled at her scalp, a uniform requirement that stripped away any personality she might have dared to show. To the world, she was a blur of black trousers and a white button-down shirt. She was a delivery mechanism for caffeine and carbohydrates, nothing more. "You're late, Jenkins," the floor manager, a man named Clive, who smelled perpetually of stale mints and anxiety, snapped as she entered the service corridor. "Traffic on the I-5, Clive, I'm sorry. It won't happen again," Alice murmured, keeping her eyes on the floor. "It better not. Tonight is a code black booking. We have Aeon Tech upstairs in the Obsidian room, the entire executive board and their top engineering division. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not linger. Fill the cups, clear the plates, and vanish. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Alice's heart did a strange little stutter. Ion Tech. Everyone knew Ion. They were the darlings of the tech world, the company that promised to revolutionize quantum battery storage. But rumors had been swirling for weeks on the financial blogs Alice read late at night in her studio apartment. Ion was in trouble. Their proprietary encryption for the new grid interface, the Project Chimera, wasn't working. If they missed the launch window next week, the company would trigger a default clause in their loans. They would be bankrupt within days. Alice tied her apron, the rough fabric familiar against her waist. She checked her reflection in the tarnished locker room mirror. She didn't look like a prodigy. She didn't look like the girl who had published a paper on Sumerian-based cryptographic morphology in an obscure academic journal when she was 16. She just looked tired. She had buried that life 3 years ago, when her father, a disgraced linguistics professor named Richard Jenkins, had died, leaving her with nothing but crushing medical debt and a blackened reputation. Alice had dropped out of her PhD program. She needed money, fast, and she needed to be anonymous. The academic world was too small. Everyone knew her father's madness. Serving tables at the Avery paid the bills, and more importantly, it kept her invisible. She picked up a silver pot of dark roast coffee and headed for the service elevator. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the hallway to the Obsidian room. Even from here, she could smell the tension. It smelled like expensive cologne and fear. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocating. The Obsidian room was soundproofed, walled with dark acoustic panels and a floor-to-ceiling window, viewing the rainy city. Around the massive mahogany table sat 50 men and women. The Golden 50, the media called them. The highest-paid engineering team in the hemisphere. And at the head of the table sat Damian Cross. Cross was a legend, 35 years old, worth $12 billion, with a jawline that could cut glass and a reputation for firing people for blinking too slowly. But tonight, Damian Cross looked like a ghost. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up to reveal a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Alice's life earnings. "We are running simulations every 30 seconds, Mr. Cross," a man to his right said. That was Dr. Oris Kogan, the chief technical officer. "The AI cannot pass the syntax. It's gibberish." "It's not gibberish, Oris." Cross slammed his hand on the table, making the china rattle. Alice froze in the shadows near the sideboard. "It is the source code my grandfather left behind. It is the key to the battery array. It works. We know it works because the prototype runs for 5 minutes before locking us out. We are missing the translation key for the command line. It's written in a mix of C++ and something else," a younger engineer whispered, rubbing his temples. "It looks like code, but the variable names, the comments, they're phonetically inconsistent. We've tried Sanskrit, we've tried Aramaic, we've tried every known dialect in the database." Alice stepped forward silently to refill a cup near the end of the table. The engineer didn't even look up. To him, she was a floating coffee pot. "Try harder," Cross hissed. "We have 12 hours before the Japanese investors pull out. If we don't unlock the Chimera interface by sunrise, Aeon Tech is dust. Do you hear me? Dust." Alice poured the coffee. As the dark liquid swirled into the cup, her eyes darted to the center of the table. There, projected onto a massive holographic display and printed on scattered sheets of paper, was the code. It was dense, jagged lines of programming syntax, but interspaced between the standard logic gates were comments and command triggers written in a script that made the engineers weep. Alice's hand trembled. A single drop of coffee splashed onto the saucer. She knew that script. It wasn't just a language. It was a cipher her father had invented to keep his diary entries private when his mind started to go. He called it Linear Z, a bastardized fusion of Minoan Linear A and Navajo Code Talker syntax. She stared at the screen. The variable triggering the system lockout wasn't a bug. It was a riddle. "Watch it," the engineer snapped, as the drop hit the saucer. "Apologies, sir," Alice whispered, pulling back into the shadows. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the only person in the room who held the key to $1 billion. But she also knew that speaking up could destroy the anonymity she had fought so hard to keep. The hours dragged on like a funeral procession. Midnight came and went. The rain outside intensified, lashing against the glass of the obsidian room. Inside, the smell of stale coffee and body odor was beginning to overpower the expensive cologne. The golden 50 were breaking down. 2 engineers were asleep with their heads on their keyboards. Dr. Kogan was pacing the length of the room, muttering to himself, tearing at his thinning hair. Damien Cross hadn't moved. He stared at the projection, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a captain watching his ship sink, refusing to get on the lifeboat. Alice continued her rounds. Refill water. Clear sandwich crusts. Refill coffee. She made herself small, but her mind was loud. Every time she passed the screen, she read more of the code. It was brilliant, really. Damien's grandfather, the founder of the original Aeon dynamos in the 70s, hadn't just encrypted the tech, he had woven it into a narrative. The code wasn't math, it was poetry. To unlock the energy, one must first admit the silence. That was what the line on the screen said, if you knew how to read the phonetics of Linear Z. "Try the brute force algorithm again on the root directory," Kogan shouted. "We can't, sir." A female engineer named Jessica replied, her voice cracking. "Every time we brute force it, the system interprets it as a hostile attack and doubles the encryption bitrate. We're locked out for 60 minutes now." "Damn it!" Kogan threw a stylus across the room. It bounced off the carpet and landed near Alice's foot. She bent down to pick it up. As she rose, she found herself standing directly behind Damien Cross. He was holding a physical printout of the code, his thumb tracing a specific line. 04F command, override. Mata Reynoso. What does it mean? Cross whispered to himself. Matareno? Is it Italian? Is it a name? It's not Italian, Alice thought. It's not a word at all. It's a phonetic shift. She placed a fresh glass of water on his coaster. She should have walked away. That was the rule. Do not speak. Do not linger. But she saw the pain in his face. It wasn't just greed. It was the weight of legacy. He was trying to save his grandfather's work, just as she had tried and failed to save her father's. It's not a name, Alice said. The voice was so soft, so out of place in the room of shouting men, that for a second Damien didn't react. Then he froze. He slowly turned his chair around. The room went silent. The 50 engineers stopped typing. Dr. Kogan stopped pacing. 50 pairs of eyes turned to the waitress standing there with a water pitcher, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. What did you say? Damien asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Alice's throat went dry. Her manager Clive was going to kill her. Then he was going to fire her. Then he was going to kill her again. I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have. She took a step back. No. Damien stood up. He was tall, looming over her. You said it's not a name. You were looking at the code. She's just the help, Damien, Kogan scoffed, walking over with a sneer. She probably thinks it looks like a pasta dish on the menu. Go on, girl. Get out. Send in someone who doesn't talk. Wait. Damien held up a hand. He looked at Alice, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the intelligence behind the fatigue. He saw the way she gripped the pitcher, not out of fear, but out of restraint. Why did you say it's not a name? Alice looked at the door. Escape was right there. She could run, get in her Civic, and drive until the gas ran out. But she looked back at the screen. That line of code. It was beautiful. It deserved to be read. Because, Alice said, her voice gaining a fraction more strength, Mata Reynoso isn't a word. It's a phonetic instruction. It's a shift cipher based on vocal inflection. Silence. Absolute stunned silence. Kogan laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Vocal inflection. This is C++ architecture, you stupid girl. Computers don't care about inflection. Your computer doesn't, Alice said, turning to look Kogan in the eye. But the man who wrote this did. He wasn't writing for a machine. He was writing for a listener. Damien stepped closer, invading her personal space. Show me. Damien, this is ridiculous, Kogan protested. We have the head of crypto from the Pentagon on Zoom in 10 minutes, and you're listening to a waitress? I said. Damien didn't look away from Alice. Show. Me. He took the stylus from her hand and shoved the printout toward her. If you're wrong, I'll have you banned from working in this city ever again. If you're right, I'll listen. Alice put down the water pitcher. Her hands were shaking, but as soon as her fingers touched the paper, the trembling stopped. It was just symbols. Just logic. This string here, she pointed to the line, Matarenoso. It's not text. It's a homophone for the Navajo word for wind, but written with Minoan syntax. It means the variable is volatile. It changes based on the fan speed of the cooling unit. She looked up. You're trying to unlock a static door, but the door is moving. You need to sync the command entry with the RPM of the cooling fans. The code is, it's breathing. The engineers stared at her. Sync with the fan speed? One of the MIT grads muttered. That's That's insane. No coding language does that. This isn't a coding language, Alice said softly. It's a lullaby. Do it, Damien commanded the engineer at the console. Sync the compile time to the cooling fan tachometer. Sir, if this fails, the system bricks. We lose everything, the engineer warned. Do it, Damien roared. The engineer's fingers flew across the keyboard. He set the parameters. He hit enter. The giant screen on the wall flashed red, then black. Kogan groaned. She killed it. You let the Waitress kill the company. Alice held her breath. Then a single green line of text appeared on the black screen. Access granted. Hello, Damien. The room erupted. The cheers were deafening. Engineers were high-fiving. Some were crying. The stock tickers on the side monitors, which had been flatlining, suddenly twitched and began a vertical climb as the automated trading bots registered the system activation. But Alice didn't cheer. She felt a sudden, cold dread. She had exposed herself. She turned on her heel and walked quickly toward the service door. She needed to leave. Now. Stop! The command cracked like a whip. It was Damien. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her. The joy on his face had been replaced by a fierce, predatory curiosity. Where do you think you're going? He asked, striding across the room. My shift is over, Alice said, not making eye contact. I have to go. Your shift is over when I say it is, Damien said, signaling to the security guard at the door. The guard stepped in front of the exit, crossing his arms. Am I under arrest? Alice asked, a spark of anger finally cutting through her fear. No, Damien said, stopping 2 feet from her. You're under contract, or you will be. He turned to the room. Everyone out. Now, take the laptops, take the drives. Go to the secure server room downstairs. I want this patch stabilized. But Damien, Kogan started. Out, Eris! The room cleared in under a minute. It was just Alice, Damien, and the rain battering the window. Damien walked over to the sidebar and poured 2 glasses of scotch. He held one out to her. I don't drink on the job, Alice said. You don't have a job anymore. I just bought the restaurant, Damien said calmly. Or I will, in the morning. Sit down. Alice didn't take the drink, but she sat in one of the plush leather chairs. She felt small in it. Damien sat on the edge of the table, looking down at her. Who are you? I'm Alice Jenkins. I serve coffee. Don't lie to me, Alice Jenkins. You just cracked a polymorphic encryption based on a dead language that 50 of the highest-paid engineers on Earth couldn't read. That requires more than a barista certification. He took a sip of his drink. Linear Z. That's what you called the syntax in your head, wasn't it? Alice stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. My grandfather used to talk about a man, Damien continued, his eyes drilling into her. A brilliant linguist, a man who helped him design the logic gates for the first AI, back before AI was even a term. He said the man went crazy, paranoiac, created his own languages to hide his thoughts. Damien leaned in. That man's name was Richard Jenkins. Is that your father? Alice felt the tears prick her eyes. She fought them back. My father was a high school English teacher, she lied. It was the lie she had told for 3 years. We can run a background check, Damien said, but we don't need to. I saw your face when you read the code. You didn't just read it. You felt it. He put the glass down. Here is the situation, Alice. The code you just unlocked? That was the front door. But inside the system there are 12 more layers. It's a labyrinth. And if we don't navigate it perfectly, the battery technology destabilizes. It becomes a bomb. Alice looked up, alarmed. A bomb? Metaphorically, and perhaps literally. A thermal runaway event. We have the door open, but we don't have the map. You do." "I can't help you," Alice said, standing up. "I'm not a coder. I'm a dropout." "I don't need a coder. I have 50 of those. I need a translator." Damien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded check. He uncapped a pen, signed it, and left the amount blank. He slid it across the table. "Name your price." 1 week. You translate the rest of the manuscript, we stabilize the grid, and you walk away with enough money to never pour coffee again." Alice looked at the blank check. It was freedom. It was the end of the debt collectors calling her at 3 a.m. It was a chance to buy a headstone for her father. But she also knew why her father had hidden the code. He was afraid of it. He was afraid of what men like Damien Cross would do with it. "I don't want your money," Alice said quietly. Damien looked surprised. "Then what do you want?" "I want to know the truth," she said. "My father didn't just go crazy. He was driven to it. Someone was hunting him for this code. If I help you, I put a target on my back." Damien's expression darkened. "If you walk out that door, the target is already there. You think Kogan didn't see you? You think the board members won't wonder who the mystery girl was? You're already in the game, Alice. The only way to survive is to win." He was right. She knew he was right. Alice took a deep breath. She reached out and took the check. She ripped it in half. "I'll help you," she said, "but not for money. If I decode this, I want access to your grandfather's private archives. I want to know what happened to my father in 1998. Damien hesitated. A shadow passed over his face. Was it guilt? Fear? Then he nodded. "Deal." Just then, the door to the obsidian room burst open. It was Dr. Kogan. He looked breathless, his face pale. "Damien," he gasped. "We have a problem. The hello message. It wasn't just a greeting." "What was it?" Damien asked, standing up. "It was a beacon," Kogan said, looking at Alice with pure hatred. "When she unlocked the system, it sent a signal out. External IP. Someone else is watching us." Alice felt the blood drain from her face. "Who?" Damien demanded. Kogan held up a tablet. "The signal bounced to a server farm in Zurich. It belongs to Vanguard Dynamics." Damien cursed. Vanguard was their biggest rival, a military contractor known for corporate espionage. "They have the key now?" Damien asked. "No," Alice interrupted. Her mind was racing. "They have the door, but they don't have the voice. They can't navigate the shift ciphers." "They will try to hack it," Kogan said. "And if they force it, they'll trigger the thermal runaway." "Then we have to be faster," Damien said, grabbing his jacket. He looked at Alice. "Welcome to the team, Jenkins. Try not to get us all killed." The Ion Tech headquarters wasn't a building. It was a fortress of glass and steel piercing the Seattle skyline. At 2:00 a.m., the lobby was empty, save for a sleepy security guard who looked bewildered as Damien Cross marched in, flanked by his entourage of exhausted engineers and one woman in a coffee-stained waitress uniform. They took the private elevator to the 40th floor, the incubator. This was the nerve center where the Chimera project lived. The room was a stark contrast to the wood-paneled obsidian room at the restaurant. Here, everything was sterile white and chrome. Rows of servers hummed behind blast-proof glass, bathed in a low, throbbing blue light. In the center of the room sat the core, a cylindrical prototype battery the size of a refrigerator, hooked up to thick coolant lines that were currently frosted over with ice. "Status?" Damien barked as he threw his jacket onto a chair. "Temperature is stable at -40, a technician replied, not looking up from his monitors. "But the logic variance is spiking. The system knows we breached the first gate. It's agitated." "It's not a dog, Simpson," Dr. Kogan snapped, pushing past Alice to get to the main console. "It's a machine. It doesn't get agitated." "It does if it thinks you're a virus," Alice said. Her voice was shaking less now. Being near the machine, oddly, made her feel calmer. It was just her and the puzzle. She walked toward the main console. The Golden 50, the engineers, parted ways for her, but their expressions were a mix of skepticism and hostility. She was an intruder, an uneducated aberration in their world of degrees and doctorates. "Give her the terminal," Damien ordered. Kogan hesitated, his finger hovering over the keyboard. "Damien, I have to object on record. Giving root access to a civilian..." "Noted, Aris. Move." Kogan stepped aside, his face a mask of tight fury. Alice sat in the ergonomic chair. It felt like sitting in the cockpit of a spaceship. The screen was a waterfall of data. The code she had unlocked at the restaurant was just the preamble. Now, she was looking at the main narrative. She took a deep breath and began to read. To the engineers, it was garbled syntax. To Alice, it was a story told in her father's voice. "The wind blows north," the code read in the linear Z script. "But the mountain does not bow. To pass, one must become the stone." "It's a stabilization loop," Alice murmured, her fingers hovering over the keys. "The energy output is trying to surge because the code is telling it to blow. We need to tell it to be stone." "English, Jenkins," Damien said, standing behind her chair. "The cooling pumps," Alice said, typing rapidly. "They are oscillating. Pulse modulation. You're trying to cool it constantly, but the code expects a rhythm. Freeze, then thaw. Freeze, then thaw, like a heartbeat." "That will fry the conductors," a woman named Jessica shouted from the back. "If we stop the continuous coolant flow, the core temperature hits critical in 3 seconds. "Trust the syntax," Alice whispered to herself. She looked at the screen. The variable was... It wasn't a variable for 0, it was a variable for endurance. "I'm engaging the pulse sequence," Alice announced. "Don't!" Kogan lunged forward. Damien caught Kogan by the arm, holding him back. "Let her work." Alice hit enter. The hum of the cooling pumps died. The room went deathly silent. On the main wall screen, the temperature gauge began to climb. 40, 20, 0, +20. "It's overheating!" Jessica screamed. "Abort! Abort!" "Not yet," Alice whispered, her eyes glued to the scrolling text. "Wait for the heartbeat. +150 degrees. +180 degrees." The red alert lights began to strobe. A klaxon wailed, a jagged, terrifying sound. "Damien, shut it down!" Kogan yelled, struggling against Damien's grip. "She's killing the core!" +198 degrees. Critical mass was 100. Alice's hands were sweating. "Come on, Dad, don't lie to me." At +99 degrees, the text on the screen shifted. A new line of code unlocked. The cooling pumps roared back to life, but with a different sound, a deep, resonant thrumming. The temperature plummeted instantly, dropping back to a stable operating range. But more importantly, the energy output efficiency bar on the screen shot from 40% to 92%. The klaxon stopped. Alice slumped back in the chair, letting out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 3 years. "Efficiency at 92%, the technician Simpson said, his voice trembling. "Holy! We've never passed 65%. It's stable. The grid is accepting the load." Damien let go of Kogan. He looked at the screen, then down at Alice. For a moment, the billionaire mask slipped, and he looked like a boy who had just seen magic. "How?" he asked. "Your grandfather didn't build a battery," Alice said quietly, rubbing her temples. "He built a synthetic organism. It needs to rest between cycles. You were force-feeding it energy until it choked." "It's brilliant," Jessica whispered, stepping closer to the screen. "Look at the data flow. It's..." It's organic. Dr. Kogan straightened his suit jacket. He didn't look impressed. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who had just realized his obsolescence. We aren't out of the woods, Kogan said coldly. We have efficiency, but we don't have control. The navigation system for the energy distribution is still encrypted. We can generate the power, but we can't send it anywhere without the final key. Alice? Damien asked. Alice squinted at the screen. The code had changed again. The deeper she went, the more personal it became. I can't read the next part, she said, frowning. It's encrypted differently. It's not linear Z. It's a date. A date? October 14th, 1998, Alice read. Does that mean anything to you? Damien went stiff. The color drained from his face. That was the day my grandfather died. Alice turned to look at him. And, Damien said, his voice tight. It was the day your father was fired from the university. The air in the room grew heavy. The connection between the two men, the billionaire genius and the mad linguist, was the knot at the center of this tangled mess. The key isn't a word, Alice realized. It's a location. The code is asking for an input from a physical source. Where the silence began. That's the prompt. Where the silence began, Damien repeated. The lab. The original lab in the basement of the old manor. He spent his final days there. Then that's where we have to go, Alice said, standing up. The final decryption key is there. I'll prep the car, Damien said. Sir, Kogan interjected, stepping in front of him. Leaving the facility now is suicide. Vanguard knows we're active. If you go out there, if we stay here, we're sitting ducks, Damien countered. Kogan, you have the con. Keep the system breathing. Do not override her pulse sequence. If the temperature spikes, you let it ride. Do you understand? Kogan's jaw tightened. Understood. Damien grabbed Alice's arm gently. Let's go. As they walked toward the elevator, Alice felt a prickle on the back of her neck. She glanced back. Dr. Aris Kogan was watching them. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at his phone, typing a message. And for the briefest second, Alice saw a small, triumphant smile curl the corner of his mouth. The rain had turned into a deluge. Damien's car was a black armored SUV that felt more like a tank than a luxury vehicle. He drove fast, weaving through the slick Seattle streets, heading toward the wooded hills of Mercer Island, where the old Cross Estate stood. Inside the car, the silence was loud. My father, Alice started, breaking the tension. You said he worked with your grandfather, but he never mentioned ion. He never mentioned technology. Richard Jenkins was a genius, Damien said, his eyes on the road. My grandfather, Elias Cross, realized that coding was just a language. He needed someone who understood the structure of language better than the structure of math. He hired your father in '95. They were friends, close friends. What happened? I don't know, Damien admitted. I was 12. All I remember is shouting. My grandfather locked himself in the manor, and your father, he just vanished. The official story was that your father tried to steal intellectual property. He was blacklisted. He didn't steal anything, Alice said fiercely. He died broke. If he had this tech, he would have sold it. I know that now, Damien said softly. Whatever they found, whatever they built, it scared them both. Elias died of a heart attack 3 years later. But before he died, he locked the Chimera source code and left me a letter. It just said, wait for the translator. Alice looked out the window at the blurring lights. I'm not a translator, Damien. I'm just a daughter who listened to her dad ramble when everyone else stopped listening. That's exactly what I need. Suddenly, the car's dashboard lit up red. The steering wheel jerked violently in Damien's hands. What the? The brakes locked. The car went into a skid, hydroplaning across 3 lanes of empty highway. "Hold on!" Damien shouted. He wrestled with the wheel, but the electronics were dead. The car spun 360 degrees, slamming into the guardrail with a deafening screech of metal on metal. The airbags deployed with a punch of white powder. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain drumming on the roof and the hiss of the radiator. "Alice?" Damien coughed, waving away the dust. "Are you okay?" "I think so," she groaned, clutching her shoulder. "What happened? Did we hit something?" "No." Damien unbuckled his seatbelt and kicked the jammed door open. The car was hacked. Someone seized the onboard computer. He dragged Alice out of the passenger side, just as headlights appeared in the distance behind them. 2 black vans were speeding down the highway, closing in fast. "Vanguard!" Damien cursed. They were tracking the car. "How?" Alice asked, stumbling as the cold rain soaked her uniform. "We left 3 minutes ago." "Someone told them we were leaving," Damien said grimly. He grabbed her hand. "Run into the woods!" They scrambled over the crumpled guardrail and slid down the muddy embankment into the dense pine forest. Behind them, tires screeched to a halt. Doors opened. Voices shouted orders. Men with flashlights were fanning out. "They're hunting us," Alice whispered, panic rising in her chest. "They don't want us," Damien said, pulling her deeper into the shadows. "They want you. You're the key. If they take you, they can force you to unlock the grid for them." They ran until their lungs burned. The woods were dark and treacherous. Alice lost a shoe in the mud but kept running, ignoring the sharp stones cutting her foot. They reached a ravine. A small, rushing creek blocked their path. "We can't cross this," Alice panted. "The current is too strong." Damien looked at his watch. It was smashed. He looked back up the hill. Flashlights were cutting through the trees, getting closer. "We don't have to cross," Damien said. "We just have to hide." He pulled her under the overhang of the ravine bank into a small hollow behind the roots of a massive fallen cedar. They huddled together, soaked and shivering. Damien pulled out a small burner phone from his jacket pocket. Not his main smartphone. "I keep this for emergencies," he whispered. "Analog signal only. Untrackable." He dialed a number. "Kogan," Damien whispered into the phone. "We will run off the road. Vanguard is here. Where is security?" Alice watched Damien's face. It went from desperate to confused, and then to a look of cold, hard realization. "Kogan," Damien asked, "why is the grid access open?" He pulled the phone away from his ear. He put it on speaker so Alice could hear. Kogan's voice came through, tinny and calm. "The grid is open because I opened it, Damien. I transferred the administrative privileges to Vanguard's server in Zurich 5 minutes ago." "You traitor," Damien hissed. "You'll never get away with this." "I already have," Kogan replied smoothly. "The company was sinking, Damien. You were betting everything on a Waitress and fairy tales. Vanguard offered me a lifeboat. 50 million and the CTO position. Business is business." "You can't run the code," Alice spoke up, leaning toward the phone. "You don't understand the syntax. You'll blow the core." There was a pause. "Ah, the Waitress. You're right, I can't read it. But I don't need to read it to sell it. Vanguard has brute force AIs that make ours look like toys. They'll crack it eventually. Goodbye, Damien." The line went dead. Damien stared at the phone. He's going to transfer the source code. If he moves the files to Zurich, Ion is finished. And if they try to brute force the stone heart variable. "The thermal runaway," Alice finished. "It won't just be a meltdown. A quantum battery of that size. It'll level 4 city blocks." The flashlights were getting closer. They could hear boots snapping twigs just 20 yards above them. "We can't stop the transfer from here," Damien said, wiping rain from his eyes. "And we can't go back to HQ. Kogan has security locked down." "The manor," Alice said. Her eyes were wide, but clear. "You said the old lab was where the silence began. If your grandfather built the system, there has to be a hardline kill switch, a master override." "There is," Damien nodded slowly. "But it hasn't been powered on in 20 years. "Then we better hope the electricity bill was paid," Alice said. Damien looked at her. He saw the waitress who was afraid of a spilled coffee drop. That girl was gone. In her place was someone forged in fire. "The manor is 2 miles north," Damien said. "We have to move." They reached the Cross Manor just as dawn was threatening to break. The storm had passed, leaving the world grey and dripping. The manor was a Gothic monstrosity of stone and ivy, looming over the cliffside. They broke a window to get in. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and old paper. Damien led the way to the library. He pulled a specific book, the Odyssey, from the shelf, and a section of the bookcase clicked and swung open. "Cliché," Alice muttered. "Classics are classics for a reason," Damien replied, a faint smile touching his lips. They descended a spiral staircase into the darkness. At the bottom, Damien found a breaker box and threw a heavy lever. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed to life. The lab was a time capsule from the late 90s. Beige computer towers, CRT monitors, and stacks of dot matrix printer paper covered every surface. But in the center of the room, hooked up to the primitive computers, was a sleek, black terminal that looked out of place. "The Alpha terminal," Damien said, rushing to it. "This is the original build." He booted it up. The screen glowed green. "System ready." "Okay," Damien typed furiously. "I'm trying to remote access the HQ mainframe. If I can use the Alpha override, I can lock Kogan out before the transfer completes." A progress bar appeared. "Connecting." Suddenly the screen flashed red. "Access denied. Biometric mismatch." "Damn it!" Damien slammed his fist on the desk. "It's locked to my grandfather's biometrics. Voice recognition." "Try your voice," Alice said. "You're his blood." "Authorization." "Damien Cross," he shouted. Voice print not recognized. "It's too old," Damien groaned. "It doesn't know who I am." Alice looked around the room. Her eyes landed on a corkboard, covered in pinned notes. In the center was a photograph. It was 2 men standing in front of this very computer, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing. One was an older man with sharp features, Elias Cross. The other was a younger man with kind eyes and messy hair. "My father," Alice whispered. She walked over to the photo. Underneath the photo was a handwritten note pinned to the cork. It was written in Linear Z. Alice read it. "To my brother in mind, Elias. If we get lost, the way home is a song." "The way home is a song," Alice repeated. She turned to the computer. "Damien, it's not looking for a voice print. It's looking for a password spoken in the right cadence. It's a shibboleth." "What password?" "The final line of the code," Alice said. "The one I couldn't translate. The date. October 14th, 1998. She closed her eyes, thinking back to her childhood. That date. She remembered it. Not because her father was fired, but because he came home early. He had been crying. He had sat on her bed and sung her a specific lullaby to help her sleep. He told her it was a magic song. The code isn't just a language, Alice realized. It's a memory. She stepped up to the microphone. "Let me try," she said. "Alice, if this fails, the system locks permanently. We lose the company. We lose everything." She looked at him. "Trust the waitress." She pressed the button. She didn't speak. She hummed, a low, melancholic tune. Then she spoke the words, not in English, but in the strange, flowing phonetics of Linear Z, matching the rhythm of the melody her father used to sing. Matare, noso, kiva, dara. Darkness falls, but the light waits inside. The cursor on the screen blinked. 1 second, 2 seconds. Voice print confirmed. Welcome, user 02, Jenkins. Damien stared at her. User 02? My father, Alice said, tears streaming down her face. He was the co-admin. He didn't steal the code, Damien. He wrote it. Damien didn't waste time. He hammered the keyboard. I'm in. I see Kogan's transfer. It's 90% complete. Cancel it. I can't just cancel it. He's routing it through a shadow server. I have to destroy the source file at HQ. What? Alice grabbed his arm. If you destroy it, the battery tech is gone. Aeon is worthless. If I don't destroy it, Vanguard gets it, and they weaponize it, Damien said grimly. And Kogan wins. No, Alice said. Don't destroy it. Invert it. Invert it? The stone heart variable. If you invert the flow, the code becomes gibberish to anyone who doesn't have the Linear Z key. Me? It will look like corruption. Kogan will think the file is broken. He'll disconnect to save his own data. It's a bluff, Damien said. $1 billion bluff. Do it, Alice commanded. Damien typed the command. Execute inversion. On the screen, they watched the progress bar of the transfer. 95%. 98%. Then the data stream turned red. Error. File corrupted. At Ion HQ, miles away, Kogan was screaming at his monitors as his precious stolen data turned into digital noise. Transfer failed, Damien breathed. He disconnected. Now lock him out, Alice said. Damien hit the final key. Admin lockdown engaged. The system at HQ slammed shut. Kogan was locked out of the mainframe. The ventilation systems in the server room locked. The doors locked. He's trapped in the glass cage, Damien said, slumping back in the chair. He looked at Alice. They were both muddy, exhausted and bruised, but they were alive, and they had won. You saved us, Damien said. We're not done, Alice said, her voice hard. We have the company back, but we still have the bomb. The bomb? The Chimera core. Alice pointed to the temperature readings from HQ, which were now streaming to the Alpha terminal. Kogan pushed it too hard before we locked him out. The inversion stopped the transfer, but it destabilized the magnetic field. The core temperature is rising again, and without the manual override at the physical site, we can't stop it from here. Damien looked at the data. Time to critical mass, 15 minutes. We have to go back, Damien said. We'll never make it in time, Alice said. Traffic, the distance, it's impossible. Damien looked at the old phone on the desk. I can't get us there, but I know someone who is already there. Who? The Golden 50, Damien said. The engineers. They're still in the building. Kogan locked them in the conference room, remember? If I can route audio to that room, you can tell them what to do. Me? Alice shook her head. They hate me. They won't listen to me. They don't have a choice, Damien said, patching the audio link. And neither do you. You're the lead engineer now, Alice. Act like it. He flipped the switch. Attention, Obsidian Room. Damien's voice boomed through the speakers at HQ. This is Cross. Dr. Kogan has been neutralized, but the core is going critical. I am patching in the only person who can save you. Listen to her, or you all die. He nodded to Alice. Alice leaned into the microphone. She closed her eyes. She imagined the 50 faces of the smartest men and women on Earth, terrified and trapped. This is Jenkins, she said, her voice steady and commanding. Pick up your keyboards. Class is in session. The conference room at Ion Tech was a cage of panic. The Golden 50 were no longer the arrogant masters of the universe they had been 24 hours ago. They were terrified prisoners. The blast doors were sealed, the air conditioning had cut out, and the room was rapidly heating up as the Chimera core 2 floors below began to radiate thermal excess. On the main screen, the countdown clock read 12 Orsiter minutes to criticality. "It's over," a senior engineer named Marcus slumped against the wall. "We're cooked. Kogan locked us in." Then, the speakers crackled. "This is Jenkins. Pick up your keyboards. Class is in session." The voice was clear, sharp, and utterly devoid of fear. It wasn't the mousy voice of the girl who refilled water glasses. It was the voice of a commander. "The Waitress?" Marcus scoffed, though his voice wavered. "Cross put the Waitress on the line? We're dead." "Sit down, Marcus," Alice's voice whipped through the speakers, "and open the command line terminal on your local subnet. Jessica, you take the cooling array. David, you take the magnetic stabilizers. The rest of you, split into 3 groups. Alpha, Beta, Gamma." There was a stunned hesitation. "I said, sit down!" Alice roared. 50 engineers scrambled to their chairs. It wasn't respect that moved them. It was the sheer shock of being yelled at by someone they had deemed invisible. "Listen to me closely," Alice continued, her voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "The code you are looking at is not broken. It is singing. The Chimera core is currently screaming, because Kogan tried to force it into a static state. We need to harmonize it." "Harmonize it?" Jessica asked, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "What are the parameters?" "I'm going to read you a sequence of phonetic shifts," Alice said. "I will translate them into hex code variables. You type exactly what I say. Do not question the syntax. Do not debug. Just play the notes." 10 Makos minutes. "Go," Jessica said. "We're ready." "Group Alpha," Alice began. "Hex code 4F9A. Variable, flow like water. Input, 0.0045 oscillation." The engineers typed. "Group Beta, hex code 3C2B. Variable, resist the stone. Input." The room filled with the furious clatter of mechanical keyboards. It was a chaotic sound, but slowly a rhythm emerged. Alice was conducting them. From a dusty basement miles away, she was orchestrating the most complex engineering feat in history. Row 5 was minutes. The floor beneath them shuddered. The core was fighting back. "Temperature is still rising," Marcus yelled. "We're at 98% capacity. The casing is going to breach." "Hold the line," Alice ordered. "We are reaching the crescendo. The system is expecting a final command to release the pressure. It's the silence variable." "We don't have a variable for silence," Marcus screamed. "The compiler rejects null values." "It's not a null value," Alice said. "It's a pause, a musical rest. I need all of you to stop typing." "What?" "On my mark, I need a total system input halt for exactly 3 seconds. If anyone touches a key, the feedback loop kills us all." "That's suicide," someone shouted. "If we stop the cooling inputs, trust the Waitress." Damien's voice cut in from the background. "Error 1. Minute. The room was vibrating violently now. Dust was falling from the ceiling tiles. "Get ready," Alice said. "Hands hovering. Wait for it." The countdown clock ticked. "So 30. So 20. Now," Alice screamed. "Hands off!" 50 pairs of hands flew up into the air. The room went silent. The typing stopped. The fans whirred. 1. The lights flickered and died. 2. A low groaning sound came from the floorboards. 3. "Execute!" Alice shouted. "Type command!" 50 engineers hit enter simultaneously. Wham! The sound wasn't an explosion. It was a massive pneumatic exhalation. The entire building seemed to sigh. The vibration stopped instantly. The emergency lights flickered back to full power. On the main screen, the red bar plummeted. "Temperature," stable. Efficiency, 100%. Grid, integrity, secure. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then, Jessica started to laugh. It was a hysterical, sobbing laugh. Then Marcus joined in. Then the whole room erupted. They were hugging, cheering, collapsing into chairs. They had done the impossible. Good work, Alice's voice came through, sounding tired now. Class dismissed. The line went dead. Marcus looked at the speaker, then at his colleagues. She just saved the company. She saved the city. She's not a waitress, Jessica said, wiping tears from her face. She's a wizard. 3 months later. The rain in Seattle was the same, but everything else had changed. Ion Tech was no longer just a company. It was a phenomenon. The launch of the Chimera grid had revolutionized energy storage overnight. Stock prices had tripled. Aon was the most valuable company on the West Coast. Dr. Aris Kogan wasn't part of it. He had been arrested at the airport trying to board a private jet to Zurich. The charges were corporate espionage, attempted sabotage, and reckless endangerment. The glass cage he had tried to trap the engineers in had become his reality, a federal holding cell. Alice Jenkins walked into the lobby of Aon Tech. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer and confident heels. She didn't have her hair in a severe bun. It hung loose around her shoulders. She walked past the security desk. The guard, the same one who used to ignore her, stood up and saluted. Good morning, Miss Jenkins. Morning, Bob, she smiled. She took the elevator to the top floor. The obsidian room had been remodeled. It was now her office. Inside, Damien Cross was waiting. He was looking out the window at the city skyline. You're late, he teased, turning around. Traffic on the I-5, Alice replied, dropping a stack of files on the mahogany desk. And I had to stop at the cemetery. Damien's expression softened. Did you show him? I did. Alice pulled a magazine from her bag. It was the latest issue of Scientific American. The cover story wasn't about Damien Cross. It was titled, The Language of Light, How Richard Jenkins Rewrote the Future. Inside was the full academic paper Alice had authored, detailing her father's linear Z syntax and how it formed the basis of the new quantum grid. She had cleared his name. He wasn't the mad linguist anymore. He was the father of modern energy. He would have been proud, Damien said, walking over to her. He would have been annoyed that it took us this long. Alice laughed. She looked around the office. It was a long way from the diner. The board is asking about the new prototype, Damien said. The Project Odyssey. They want to know who is leading the team. Alice walked to the window. She looked at her reflection. She didn't see the tired girl who hid in the shadows anymore. She saw the architect. Tell them I am, Alice said. And tell the Golden 50 to get their coffee ready. We have work to do. Damien smiled and held out his hand. Shall we get to work, partner? Alice took his hand. Let's translate the future. And that is the story of Alice Jenkins, the woman who was invisible to the smartest men in the room until the moment she became the only person they could see. It's a powerful reminder that genius doesn't always wear a suit, and it doesn't always come with a degree from MIT. Sometimes it wears an apron and pours your coffee. Alice's father, Richard, had a secret language, but Alice had the courage to speak it. She went from clearing tables to clearing the name of the man she loved most. What did you think? Would you have trusted the waitress if your life depended on it? And do you think Damien and Alice? Well, you know. Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of underdogs, twists and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss another story from the edge of reality. If you're so smart, try listening. See you next time.